Hey TV fans, I am bored now, back with you to talk about Dexter Resurrection, Season 1, Episode 3. The episode is called Backseat Driver. Full spoilers from the start of this review. This was another pretty dire and tedious episode. It may actually be my least favourite of the 3 episodes so far, but I do have a positive to start off with. It's a positive which I'm worried that they might squander in future episodes. But the positive is the end of the episode and what gets set up at the end of the episode. Because I think what gets teased is, on paper at least, the best idea this show has right now. I think the setup with the Uma Thurman character, so we get one brief scene with her in the middle of the episode and we learn that she's planning this fancy dinner party. She's on the phone to someone who she's organising it with. We learn at the end of the episode then it's her gathering together all these serial killers because Dexter gets an invitation to it. I think that's a really fun idea. I think it's a good use of Uma Thurman, because in the scene that she was planning the dinner party over the phone, she was coming off very kind of Hannibal Lecter, like she had that kind of air. A little less hammy, like a bit more toned down, but I was getting those sorts of vibes, and it felt like that kind of thing because she was like planning a dinner party and she just had that menacing air about her. Now, I'm not saying then this idea of gathering together all these like serial killers or bad people for a dinner party is that original, because plenty of other stories have done it, but I think to do it in this show, in a Dexter show, is actually a fun idea, and I think it could be a good use of Uma Thurman's character, because we're still not quite sure what side of the fence she's on. Like, is she ex-law enforcement, current law enforcement, and she's got maybe a vendetta against these serial killers? Or is she on that side of the fence herself? Is she herself a serial killer? And maybe that's why she's motivated to meet up with these other serial killers that she admires. My concern with this is that I think this is, like I said, the best idea this show has given me so far. And I think it would be a fun use of Uma Thurman. So I would actually want this to be, I'm going to use a pun here, but the main meal, the main course, the main attraction. I would like to see this become the main storyline, at least of season 1 of this show. And this stuff is just going to be like whiffed away over 1 or 2 episodes. Then it's not gonna, because ultimately it does seem like this show is obsessed with kind of having Dexter and his son, and that's kind of the show. So Harrison is following in Dexter's footsteps. Dexter is concerned about him, but is he going to encourage it as time goes on? Is he going to start teaching his son the tricks of the trade again, or is he going to try and like discourage him from getting involved in killing and going down that whole path? And at this point it's a plot which has become very tedious. So that's my concern, is that I think they will just rush through the Uma Thurman dinner party stuff, and then it will be reverting back to type with Dexter and Harrison, and that stuff is just like much less interesting to me. And it might just be a case that they can't really tie Uma Thurman down for a great amount of time. It's a really jarring use of music, like music type cues, and it just gives it like this whole kind of like zingy sort of flavour which it really doesn't need. And I know you had it a little bit in the original show, But I think at least that was just more the stock kind of tropical type music because they were in Florida. So I don't think it was as egregious as it was here. I think in a show like Dexter, I just want it to be a bit more moody and have a bit more atmosphere. Use of the Bee Gees, Staying Alive. Maybe just as a bit of a joke because it's a serial killer show, but like you've got the detective who's investigating the Harrison thing at the hotel, and she's got it on headphones as she's like walking through the crime scene or where she thinks the crime might have taken place. And I guess it's just to show then she's got like unconventional methods, and we see Harrison in the kitchen watching her, and she seems to be putting this stuff together. They're running with this theme of technology and kind of Dexter maybe starting to get a little bit too old to be a serial killer, like getting a bit behind the times. And some of that stuff is okay, like there's some decent jokes in there, but it does make it feel a little bit like a sitcom, like almost like a Dexter style sitcom. This whole thing about how after his first day on the job, Dexter has like an approval rating of like 4.5, something like that. So it's like he's on the app, he's looking up his score based on what customers have rated him. I mean, do taxi drivers even get rated on these apps? It seems like a very random use of it, really, because you can't really think there's going to be that much difference between taxi drivers and how their service compares. But okay, I'm willing to believe in the modern world then it might extend to taxi drivers. But it's this idea that so far he's not rated very well. And it's played as a gag because one of the first customer we see him picked up is this quite shallow younger guy who's kind of bragging about how he's got a date with like an exotic dancer. And you get that sort of gag where Dexter is like half tempted to like whack this guy almost. The whole thing of him being awkward around society and being awkward around like this sort of super masculine guy who's a little bit of a jerk. So the joke works because then you cut to him like looking at his approval score. But I think the problem I have with that stuff is that it just becomes too much of a time waster, where they keep jumping back to it and it just takes up too much time in the episode. Because again, in the old show, you always had humour and you always had like these little side things. I'm not saying there wasn't like pointless side plots in the original show, because there definitely was, but I think when you just had this sort of humour, it was never dominating in the way they're trying to make it here, where they're trying to make the stuff with the technology more important than it actually is. Some of the Dexter stuff feels oddly like a sitcom in this episode, because you get a scene with him. I think the guy's name is Blessing, the one who he's like befriended, who got him the job as a cabbie, having dinner with the family, and there's a little bit of jealousy from the daughter because she thinks that the dad is showing more enthusiasm for Dexter and his new job driving cabs than he is like her acupuncture business. And there's a thing later on where Dexter gets, because it's the guy's daughter, he agrees to let her have a go at him. And again, that's another thing where it's like, yeah, can we get on with the main plot now? It's just weird then, considering they've got all these guest stars lined up for later in the season. They've still got Christian Ritter to come this season, so you're guessing she would have at least a decent sized part. Uma Thurman is already involved. Got Peter Dinklage to come. So they've still got some big guest stars to come. The Dexter stuff is pretty boring in the episode. Another like contrived scene where so easily gets the information of this guy who copycatting him as like he's redoing like the Bay Harbor butcher gimmick. Like Dexter just gets his information so easily, like where he's going to be the next night, than he's meant to be at the Rockefeller Center. Again, it's meant to be a bit of humour, because I think it's meant to be just a gag about how easy it is to bullshit people nowadays, and how technology allows you to scam people a lot easier. We're going to keep having these contrivances because the show has given itself these hurdles to jump over. Like, it keeps giving itself added hurdles to jump over because of the convoluted nature anyway, and also because they've got this issue from New Blood where they suddenly have to write around what happened in New Blood, and the fact that New Blood was originally a limited series, like a classic table death, you know, where he has him on his table. And I think that's another thing, is I think this show is going to have more of that stuff for the target audience, because probably that was a complaint in New Blood, that there wasn't enough of that stuff for the fans. The Harrison being interviewed scene by the cops, and that scene is very like darkly lit, and there's just not a lot of spark. And one of the things that stands out in the scene is how bad the actor playing Harrison is. Like, I've seen much worse, but I wasn't impressed with him in New Blood. I don't think so far in this he's come across much better, trying to lie on his feet. And that's quite an interesting detail, because we see that because he's much younger and in over his head, then he's not as smooth or confident as lying as his dad is. Quite like that. I just think the acting is very wooden from the actor in the scene, so he doesn't really convey it enough. And as I said, there's just no real life to the scene. For some reason he still thinks Dexter's dead, or at least Dexter seems to think that he still believes that he's dead, because we get another scene of Dexter debating whether to approach his son, and we get another scene of him and Harry debating it. So already that plot's getting very repetitive. But I'm pretty sure Harrison would have been told by the hospital than Dexter had come out of the coma. Now, I'm not sure about hearing on the news that he had fled and that kind of thing. This is in New York, so it's in the big city. It's a different state and all the rest of it. So I can sort of forgive them that. I'm not saying necessarily he would have heard it on the news or anything like that. Because if it was a local investigation, it's possible that only like the local detectives would know. I do find it weird that someone from the hospital wouldn't have called Harrison and said, "Hey, your father's out of the coma." It's also funny that Harrison assumes that he's dead, even though he was in a coma, and people obviously can come out of comas. And I guess it's just that idea of moving on with your life. He claims that, "I left the hotel that night and I had a one-night stand." And we see him stumble over like a girl's name, trying to come up with a girl's name, and he does that thing of saying like two names, which is like it's meant to be nervous. It's also him, I think, trying to be convincing in a lie, because it's that detail of, well, if I slept with her and it was just a one-night stand, then, you know, I might not have got her name. Come back to it, and there's almost a funny line about, "Hey, you forgot to tell us who you had the one-night stand with." And it's meant to be awkward because Elsa's standing right there, and her and Harrison have been getting closer. Tries to convince him that, hey, we can get the charge down to manslaughter, because she says, I think I've figured out what's going on, I think. And they both say, like, you were defending a girl who was going to be, like, a victim of rape. So you actually did, like, an honourable thing. So they start saying, because of that, we could get your sentence down and it could just be manslaughter. But we just need the full truth now. We need... Well, either that or we need, if you do have an alibi, we need your alibi. And it's a bit weird because then they just seem to cut away to another scene and you don't really hear the end of it. You don't really hear what Harrison actually says, because it does look like he is going into a confession. Bautista, there's a couple of small scenes with him because he finds out that Jim Lindsay, as he's gone by, like, the van has been detected in the city. So there's a small scene with him, Vince Mazzucca and Joseph Quinn, because again, you're getting small cameos from them to please the fans. And it's a fine scene. I don't really have too much of a problem with the scene. I was reminded by how boring Quinn is. He says nothing of interest in the scene. I do get a little pop out of Mazzucca having the same laugh, but just it's a bit more gruffled now because he's getting older. He makes a random joke about OnlyFans, and it's like, oh hey, because Bautista in the scene says, I'm retiring because I've got something to deal with, and he's talking about the Dexter situation. He's now going to make that his focus. It seems a bit extreme to retire from the police force just because of that, but he says that he's approaching retirement anyway. Bazooka makes the crack about OnlyFans, and he always said inappropriate things like that, but it seems like a bit of a random gag. If this show has anything about it, Bautista will bring Dexter to justice, because that is the most satisfying outcome considering their history. That's my thoughts on Dexter Resurrection for the week. Backseat Driver. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe. Share me out on social media. And I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.